Okay, Kinesiology 230. This is chapter 19. This chapter is specific to clients with nutritional or metabolic concerns. We'll have an introduction. We'll talk a little about overweight and obesity, but I have to tell you, this is one of those tougher chapters to go through because it concerns kind of psychological, emotional issues that many times your clients may have or walk in with, and you just don't know it until you get to know them and find out a little bit more about their health history. With this on chapter 19, here we are on page 517, I think this is. These are the things we're going to go over. I'll let you take a read to that if you want to pause, but I'm going to go ahead and move on. So with this, and this can't be stressed enough, with personal trainers, you can't diagnose or prescribe care, especially when we start talking about some of the conditions that are listed in this chapter. There's a certain scope of practice you have to have. And if it's outside your scope of practice, make sure you refer the client to an appropriate healthcare professional and stay within your scope of practice. I know, like when I was working with that medical group downtown, I knew my scope of practice and I knew what the folks upstairs were doing when they were talking with people about risk factors and obesity and bulimia and anorexia. That was not my scope of practice. My scope of practice was just to keep people moving. So with obesity, they provide a little bof like these shocking bullet points. It's considered a BMI of over 30. As of 2018, they note here in the book, 42.4% of American adults are obese. The incidence of childhood obesity has tripled between 1960 to 2014. Now, I say this because I say believe there because I believe that's what they were getting after in the book here, but it was hard to differentiate if that was their starting point was 1960 because that was another bullet point they used for another metric for adult obesity. So it's a little bit quirky there. But just understand that it has tripled in the same amount of time as adults. And it has a number of comorbidities associated with it. Now, in the book, there's one part here that they specifically note that overweight and obesity, which they differentiate, have been designated as the second leading cause of preventable death in the United States. And they note that overweight, it's a BMI of 25 to 29.9 kilograms per meter squared. And I hope you can calculate BMI at this point of the academic career here in this program. And then obesity is a BMI greater than 30 kilograms per meter squared. And what's quirky about BMI is this. I stand about 5'10"-ish, maybe a little bit taller than that, and I'm about 180 pounds. I would be considered overweight, though I work out, though I'm fit, though my resting heart rate is 60. But I also lift weights, and I have muscle to me, so it skews the numbers a little bit. But the book does differentiate here between overweight and obesity. Just realize overweight is at 25 to 29.9, and obesity is greater than 30. All right. They talk about these kind of at greater length here, but they do have one bullet point that you should have as a takeaway. On average, a person who is obese has a higher resting metabolic rate and expends more energy and activities than those who are overweight or normal weight. And this kind of makes sense when you think about it, is they have to carry around more baggage. They have to carry around more body weight. When they climb up the stairs, they may weigh 280 pounds or 380 pounds. Well, that's a whole nother body worth of me that basically I take myself and hop on my own back and carry me up the stairs, right? So in terms of energy balance and calorie expenditure, those who are obese burn more calories than those who are overweight than those who are at normal weight. And they note that positive energy balance, more calories in than burned, neutral energy balance, consumption equals calorie burn. And then you have a negative energy balance, would be just the exact opposite of positive. You have less calories in that are actually burned. So that's normally a weight loss environment, where a positive energy balance is a weight gain environment. And then BMI will obviously be higher for obese individuals. They have two main types that they outline in the book here. And it gets a little bit funky because there's two subtypes of one of them that the terminology is very similar, but let's just read through this. Gynoid obesity, pear-shaped. The fat is mostly in the hips and the legs, where android obesity is apple-shaped. And if you want to draw a correlation between Android phones and Apple phones, and maybe that's how you remember Android as apple-shaped, that might be the way to do it, provides a predictor of risk for type 2 diabetes. So, in some regard, when you look at ways to remember stuff, Android A, and then it's apple shape A. And you can kind of make that argument in terms of how to remember these things, but the big takeaway you got to have is android obesity is characterized by high amounts of body fat in the trunk and abdominal areas, and this excess fat in the abdomen is out of proportion to the rest of the body, and it's an independent predictor of a risk for type 2 diabetes, hypertension, and cardiovascular disease. And here would be a good example of android to the left, gynoid to the right. If we go ahead and look at this at abdominal fat in clients who are overweight and obese, I'll let you read through this. But if you have somebody who is rather sizable, big body person, you may have to use waist circumference instead of skin fold, just because the skin fold calipers are just not going to work on that person. If you're going to do evaluations, make it private. You got to make it matter of fact. You can't make it uncomfortable, etc. And I'll let you read through this. But some of the cutoffs that they have down here: type 2 diabetes, dyslipidemia, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, etc., BMI of 25 to 34. You also have another measure that's men over 40 inches of waist circumference or women over 35 inches of waist circumference. Those are some of the key numbers you need to remember going forward. So CVD, cardiovascular disease, is the leading cause of death across most racial and ethnic groups. It's not like it picks a favorite. And the factors for CVD include both modifiable and non-modifiable risk factors. And one of the biggest modifiable risk factors is just being able to move a little bit and then being able to lose a little bit of weight. And they note here that according to the American Heart Association, the percentage of body weight loss that can help reduce the risk is 3 to 5% of body weight. So if somebody weighs 400 pounds and they lose 5% of that, well, you can do the math on what 5% of 400 pounds is, 20, and you can get an idea of how that can be of benefit. I will tell you that that's one step in a much larger process. Now, as you work with your clients and you work with athletes, and you're going to have some people who are big-bodied, for them, just the simple act of moving is a challenge. And I will tell you that the simple act of them just showing up is a victory, because for them, they are confronted so much and so often with being obese, perhaps fat shaming. They're nervous about getting on an airplane with somebody else, or even getting on an elevator with somebody else. So you have these challenges that are associated with that, and it's a challenge for these individuals just to even go about their day, to even wash themselves. If they drop something on the floor, they have to get down on the floor to pick it back up, and it's a challenge for them to get back up. So understand that your programming, to some degree, may have to include some ADLs. And by ADLs, I mean, I can tell you there were times when I would go to a person's in-home and they were folks that were obese and they had a BMI that was probably closer to 40 than 30. And little things like picking things up off the floor, or reaching up for things in the cabinet, or just being able to bend over to touch their shoes. These were things that were of great challenge to the person, and skills that we had to work on for them because of their somatotype. And it has to be done in a way that's professional and positive, but I will tell you that these are people that face great challenges every day, and oftentimes the extra weight that they carry with them is not apparent in terms of their somatotype. Sometimes it's psychological, emotional, because of how they perceive that they're being treated, but also sometimes the obesity itself came as a result of a protection mechanism from a abusive parent, or maybe a football coach who told them they weren't big enough and they weren't going to equate to anything. And so they create this armor, which is the body fatness, to be able to protect themselves. So a lot that goes into it, guys, a lot. Just be kind is all I can tell you, because you have no idea what people are fighting with. All right, I'm going to break off and go to the next presentation.